I've been dating Tim for 5 years, but he still hasn't proposed. That is, until he did it at his friend's party, right in front of his ex-girlfriend, Wendy. Finally getting the ring I hoped for after 5 years, I wasn't as happy as I thought I'd be. I saw Wendy looking at the ring on my hand with tears in her eyes. Her gaze told me she thought I'd stolen something from her. Later, I found out this ring was originally meant for her. On the day of Tim's friend's party, he canceled all his work plans. He bought me a $3 million ruby necklace and even took me to a celebrity makeup artist. Looking at my glamorous reflection, I blushed and mumbled, "It's just a gathering with your friends, no need to get this fancy." Tim just laughed, squeezed my cheek, and said, "I want everyone to see what a beautiful girlfriend I have." I kissed him on the cheek, feeling all sweet and in love. But then I saw a girl at the party and my heart suddenly felt pinched, like it was tied in knots. I recognized her immediately as the girl from the photo in Tim's diary. In the photo, she's smiling brightly, big eyes radiating happiness. And that diary? It was full of little moments shared with her. That was the first time I got mad at Tim. Hurt as I was, I asked him who she was. Tim stayed calm, tossed the diary and photo in the trash without hesitation, and held me tight, explaining, "She was my ex, from college, before we broke up. I just forgot to throw them away. Emily, I've already forgotten about her. Don't worry, it's you I love now." I believed him, his serious tone convincing me. But now, I wonder if he ever truly forgot her. She was sitting next to a guy. When she saw us, she introduced him as her fiancé, someone she had posted about on social media. Tim acted like he didn't hear, pulling out a chair for me with care. Her gaze was filled with jealousy when she looked at me, but she swapped it for a smile quickly. "So, you're Tim's girlfriend?" "Hi, I'm Wendy, just a friend of Tim's." I gave her a nod. "I'm Emily," I replied, glancing at Tim to catch any hint of emotion. But there was none. He caught my gaze, gently moved some stray hair from my face to behind my ear, reassuring me silently. During dinner, Wendy's fiancé put a piece of cilantro beef on her plate. Tim's hand tightened around his chopsticks. He seemed about to say something but held back. Jackson noticed and teased Wendy's fiancé, "She never eats cilantro. Watch out, man." Tim eased up, placing a shrimp on my plate, saying warmly, "Eat more." I stared at the shrimp, feeling a pang of hurt because while Wendy almost got served cilantro, Tim forgot I'm allergic to seafood. "How long are you staying this time, Wendy?" Jackson asked casually. Looking at Tim, she quietly replied, "I'm not leaving." "Planning to settle down and get married?" Jackson inquired. Wendy nodded, holding her fiancé's hand with a strained smile. "Yeah, y'all better come to our wedding." Suddenly, Tim squeezed my hand so tightly it hurt. I yelped, pulling back, "Tim!" He must have realized he was hurting me and quickly let go. Jackson joked, "Tim, better hurry up and marry Emily already." Tim pulled a velvet box from his pocket and slipped a diamond ring on my finger, staring at me tenderly. "Whenever Emily's ready, I'm ready." I almost laughed at the absurdity. "Whenever I'm ready, huh? We've been together for 5 years. I've hinted more than once about getting married. My grandmother's getting old, and her biggest wish is for me to find someone who loves me and to hand me over at my wedding." Tim always made excuses, saying work keeps him too busy for marriage but promising it would happen once things settled down. Every time my grandma would ask, I'd pretend I wasn't ready. "Grandma, I'm not in a rush, you know. There's a line of guys wanting to marry your granddaughter, stretching all the way to France." She'd laugh and shakily take out the wedding quilt she'd been sewing for me. "That's okay, it gives me more time to make these quilts for you," she said, showing off her handiwork. The stitches brought a stabbing pain to my heart, making my eyes sting. I nodded vigorously, hoping she wouldn't notice the ache in my eyes. Finally, the ring I waited 5 years for. But I couldn't be happy. Wendy looked at it with tears, her eyes accusing me of being a thief. During the rest of the evening, Wendy seemed lost and glanced at Tim, eyes red. Tim never looked up, didn't even talk to her. Just kept drinking. When the party ended, her fiancé left for an urgent call. Jackson offered her a ride, and she numbly nodded. As we headed to the parking lot, a car suddenly lost control and sped towards us. The sound of screeching brakes tearing through the air. I instinctively tried to pull Tim aside but grabbed at thin air. I saw Tim quickly embracing a dazed Wendy as they fell onto the grass. My mind went blank. The car stopped just in time, but my leg got cut by the sharp edge, leaving a long gash that bled continuously. A chill spread through my chest, numbing the pain. I had never seen Tim so out of control. He was anxiously holding Wendy, not noticing the blood on his hand from the gravel. All his worry was for her. The driver, a tall man, stepped out of the car, his face tight with concern. He crouched to check my injury, his voice apologetic. "Sorry, someone tampered with my car, the brakes failed. Let me take you to the hospital." Tim froze at the sound, then hurriedly pushed Wendy aside and approached me quickly. Seeing my bleeding leg, his eyes filled with guilt and pain. "I'm sorry, Emily. I didn't know you were there." I saw her heading straight for the car and reacted. The man suddenly scoffed, his tone mocking. "Sorry to interrupt, I thought you were the lady's boyfriend." Never seen a boyfriend abandon his girlfriend to save someone else. Tim's face went pale. He held my hand desperately. "Emily, I didn't mean it." I shook off his hand, blinking back tears. He tried to speak again, but the man cut him off with a lazy tone. "Sir, the priority is getting her to a hospital, not listening to your excuses." Tim shot him a look of annoyance. "I know." The man handed me a business card, saying he'd be responsible for everything, and left. Wendy approached, her demeanor returning to its usual aloofness. She glanced at me with barely concealed disdain, then softly thanked Tim. Tim's face turned stern, his attitude towards her reverting to cold detachment. Something inside me felt shattered. I couldn't hold it together any longer. Limping, I walked away with tears blurring my vision. Tim caught up with me and scooped me up despite my resistance. He hailed a cab and gently placed me inside. Blood continued to seep through, and as he bent down to check my wound, I coldly pushed him away. "Don't touch me." I broke down crying, but he softly placed a hand on my restless hands and tied his tie to bandage my wound. I looked down at his pained expression, careful movements not to hurt me. The accident flashed in my mind. His instinct to protect Wendy showed he'd never stopped watching over her. He might despise her, but he still loved her. Instinct proved it was from the heart. A sharp ache spread through my chest, tears welling up. "You still have feelings for her, don't you? In danger, your instinct was to save her." "I wanted to save you. Isn't it funny?" I looked down, laughing bitterly. "And today, you proposed to provoke her, didn't you? We've been together 5 years, and you've never proposed. Your ex announces her engagement, and you lose control, taking it out on me. What am I to you?" I felt more and more wronged, covering my face and sobbing. "It's not that, Emily. I mean it." Tim flustered, held my face, his thumb gently wiping my tears away. "Emily, I'm sorry. It's my fault you felt hurt and misunderstood, but it's not what you think. The accident happened so fast, I saw her about to hit the car. It was instinct to save her. In any such situation, it's my reflex, whether it's her or a stranger. But I didn't know you were there too. Emily means the most to me. Had I known, I would never have let you get hurt, even if I had to take the hit." As for the proposal. He held my hand, brushing the ring. His tone serious. "I planned it for today, taking you to dress up because I know our Emily would want to look her best for a proposal." I finally looked at the ring. An intricate rose design covered in diamonds. The same white rose he'd always given me. I glanced up at Tim's face. His eyes sincere and earnest. Really? Tim pinched my cheek gently. Really, my silly Emily, trust me. While the doctor treated my wound, Tim's phone started ringing with a tune I'd never heard. Lyrics playing about missing someone, fearing being lost in the crowd, ensuring to always be there. A ringtone seemingly dedicated to someone special. Tim's expression shifted, as if he hadn't heard it in ages. But he didn't answer. He flipped the phone upside down and took my hand. If it hurts, squeeze me, don't endure it alone. On the way back, Tim talked a lot about Wendy. We grew up together, got together in college. My family went bankrupt after we graduated. Her parents forced her to leave me, saying they'd cut her off otherwise. I promised I'd work hard, start a business, succeed, if only she'd wait. But she couldn't, leaving when we graduated, going overseas with someone else. I guess it's true what they say, tables turn. Her business eventually hit a rough patch too. But luckily, she left me behind. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met Emily, who's just a fantastic girlfriend. He clutched my hand, and his eyes sparkled in the sunlight. In them, I could see my own reflection, like it was the first day we met. I was running a bookstore, and it was just an ordinary day. I was sitting at the checkout, reading, when I suddenly heard a loud crash by the shelves. Rushing over, I found a guy in a thin jacket had passed out on the floor. His lips were pale, and he was holding onto an economics book. The sunlight streamed in through the window and hit his face. He slowly opened his eyes, which sparkled like a star, and murmured something weakly. That's when I realized he had low blood sugar. I helped him to a chair, almost collapsing under his 6-foot frame. After giving him some water, I handed him a couple of chocolates from my pocket. It brought him back to life, and after saying thanks, he was about to leave. Watching his slender figure, I couldn't help but speak up. Hey, I accidentally got an extra meal. Can you help me out with it? I'm on a diet. He froze and turned around. His eyes landed on the boxed meal at the checkout, his eyelashes trembled with a hint of emotion. That's how I found out he was Tim from across the way at Cambridge. He had everything going for him until his family went bankrupt overnight, his parents tragically died, and he was left with barely enough to eat. I cleared out a room on the second floor of the bookstore and softly proposed, I need a librarian here. Just some morning work sorting books. Food and room included. Are you interested? Tim nodded. In the days that followed, Tim gave everything he had to his business, never allowing himself to relax. He confessed his feelings for me after making his first successful deal. We clicked surprisingly well, rarely arguing. The only time we had a tiff was when I stumbled upon his diary and photos with his ex-girlfriend in his drawer. After that, he treated me even better, ensuring I felt secure and loved. He remembered my periods and made longan and red date soup every time. He expected the times of year when I might catch a cold and prepped everything. He put an umbrella in my bag and reminded me to dress warmly. On birthdays and anniversaries, he'd cook up all kinds of surprises. I truly thought we'd be forever. But then today, when I saw Wendy, doubt crept in. Yet, as Tim gazed at me so intently with love, I bowed my head. I wanted to trust him again and give happiness another shot. Tim seemed to feel guilty and soon started planning our wedding. He bought a bunch of gifts and drove 5 hours to visit my family. Grandma heard about the wedding and was so excited she was at a loss for words, holding Tim's hand with tears streaming down her face. Though she was hard of hearing and her speech wasn't clear, Tim didn't mind one bit. He squatted down before her, listening diligently, and promised he'd take care of me for life, repeating it until she understood. My eyes brimmed with tears. All my last doubts vanished. In the days that followed, Tim carefully planned everything. From the wedding scenes to styles, everything was just my taste. Even the wedding dress was a top new design. Everyone said they envied me for being with a man like Tim, wealthy and devoted. On Valentine's Day, we planned to head to City Hall to get our marriage license. But then on the way, that ringtone played again. The sound grew louder and filled the car with tension. This time, Tim didn't hang up. His grip on the wheel hesitated a long while before finally answering the call. On the other end came broken sobs, mingled with cursing. It was chaotic. The longer Tim listened, the more his brow furrowed. He didn't even notice a car coming from a nearby corner. "Tim, there's a car ahead." My scream brought him back. He jerked the wheel and stopped by the roadside. I sat there, trembling with fear, my back drenched with cold sweat. But Tim didn't notice. He hastily explained, "Emily, something urgent came up. Can you head home first?" I didn't know how I got out of the car. I just remember Tim racing past me before I'd even found my balance, disappearing into the morning mist. I sat there on the ground, the chilly autumn wind whipping my coat. The cold seeped into my bones, making me feel miles away from that glaringly red city hall. It felt unreachable. Turning in the opposite direction, I limped away. Jackson suddenly called. "Sis, Tim's in trouble. He fought someone, broke their bones. Hurry, you gotta stop him." My mind buzzed as my hands quivered, trying hard to hang up the call. On the drive to the spot Jackson mentioned, Jackson's explanation echoed in my head. He said Tim fought against Wendy's fiancé. Wendy called off her engagement and wanted out. Her fiancé disagreed and physically abused her, demanding the money he spent on her back. She tried escaping, was caught, and got beaten. She called Tim for help. He arrived and brawled with the guy. Wendy's fiancé ended up in the hospital, unconscious. Now his family might press charges against Tim. That special ringtone he set was for Wendy. Of course, who else but her could shake him so profoundly? It turns out he would even put our license off for Wendy's sake. My palms were cold, but my thoughts suddenly became clear, and I slowly found the answer in my heart. When I got to the complex, Wendy's door was open, and the place was a mess. I followed the few drops of blood on the floor up to the rooftop. Standing at the top of the stairs, I saw Wendy crouched in a corner. There were red marks on her cheeks, and her shoulders were trembling. Her tears looked like broken pearls, sliding down her face. Tim stood in front of her, his expression unclear, and blood was dripping from his clenched fist. "Why are you with someone like that?" He demanded harshly, but in his tone, you could hear the unmistakable tenderness. "Why?" She cried even harder, shouting, "I thought about you every moment while I was abroad. Then I heard you had a girlfriend. I know I hurt you back then, but I had my reasons. I was forced to leave you. My parents said if I didn't, they'd make sure you'd never get back on your feet. I wanted to be with you, but I was scared they'd crush you. But I really missed you. I was too afraid of losing face, so I found someone else just to spite you." "For spite, you'd throw away your happiness?" Tim questioned angrily. "How could you be so foolish?" He gripped Wendy's shoulders, wanting to shake her, but unable to bring himself to do it hard. Wendy threw herself into his arms. "Yes, I'm foolish enough to lose someone I loved for so many years." She hugged him tightly, crying her heart out. "Tim, you do care about me, right? You remember I don't like cilantro, how you always protect me first when there's danger. Even when you gave her the ring you intended for me, it was to spite me, right? Tim, I really regret it. If I could do it over, I'd never leave you, even if we had nothing. I'd start over with you. Can we?" Tim didn't say anything. His hands trembled slightly, lost in thought. Wendy tried to lift her head to kiss him, but he turned away. With a sorrowful laugh, she stood up to climb the railing to jump off, the wind buffeting her unstable body. Tim snapped to his senses, lunged forward, and held her tightly. "Are you crazy?" Her tears fell in large, hot drops on his hands, and she ignored everything, kissing him fiercely. "I'm not crazy, I just want you to see what's in your heart." Tim pressed her head, his fingers tangled in her hair, holding her close. Time seemed to stand still at that moment. Their movements turned into slow frames before my eyes, painfully dragging my heart. All the sounds around me seemed to fade, and my heart felt like it had shattered, too painful to utter a word. With a loud bang, the ring slipped from my hand, something that was never mine, never to be held. Tim turned suddenly, seeing me standing there. His face turned pale, full of confusion. He immediately let go of Wendy. At that moment, I became strangely calm. I picked up the ring from the ground and gently placed it on the ledge. "We're done," I said. "Emily." Tim seemed to want to chase after me. Wendy suddenly fainted. Tim paused, hesitation and struggle crossing his face. Finally, he looked at me and said, "Emily, I'll take her to the hospital first. I'll talk to you later," then turned to take care of Wendy. I laughed bitterly and left without hesitation. Back home, reminders of the wedding were everywhere. Red envelopes, wedding invitations, red couple slippers. All piercingly bright under the light. I stared at them for a long time, not touching them, knowing these were all picked by Tim. Maybe they were always meant for Wendy. I took out a suitcase and started packing my things slowly. In the study, while grabbing books, I found the diary and photos in the drawer again. The book's cover was spotless, not a speck of dust. He had retrieved it from the trash. He wasn't willing to let go. Each night we spent together, he was in the study, staring at her photo or lost in their past through that diary. 5 years, ending in such a ridiculous way. Not much was truly mine, so packing was quick. The house was filled with bits of his and mine together. Couple toothbrushes and cups in the bathroom, matching outfits in the closet, jewelry he gave me on the vanity, video games we played in the living room. I dropped the clothes off at the donation box downstairs. He can deal with the jewelry himself. I powered up my phone to see tons of missed calls from Tim and texts explaining things. "Emily, Wendy's getting 4 fluids, the doctor suggests someone stays with her. I'll come back after she's done. It isn't what you think, I'll explain when I get back, you should get some rest." I chuckled and blocked him. Before leaving with my suitcase, I took one last look at the home Tim and I had built and decorated together. Every trace of me in it was gone, and with it, my love for him. I left the keys on the hallway table, and left without looking back. I went to the store and packed up all of Tim's stuff from upstairs. After his business succeeded, the bookstore became our little hideaway, where we snuck beers up to the attic. But I didn't want any connection to him anymore. I spent all night erasing every trace of him. When I was finally done, my head was throbbing. My vision started getting blurry, and I knew something was wrong. I pulled out my phone to call my best friend. "Hey, I'm feeling a bit dizzy. Can you pick me up? I'm at the bookstore." But on the other end of the line was a voice that was both unfamiliar and somewhat familiar. "Emily? Which bookstore are you at?" I managed to say the name of the bookstore, but couldn't hold my ground and everything went dark. When I woke up again, I was staring at the white ceiling of a hospital. "You're awake?" A cold male voice spoke next to me. I turned my head and met a concerned gaze. It was him, Henry, the guy I had accidentally bumped into before. Turns out I called the wrong person. His number was saved right below my best friends in my contacts list. He handed me a cup of warm water, his face calm but showing a bit of anger and concern. "Where's your boyfriend? You're pregnant and he leaves you alone?" The words hit me like a ton of bricks. It took me a while to regain my composure. "We broke up," I said, my fingertips turning white as I held the cup, nearly embarrassed. "The last time, it was also in front of him, when my boyfriend left me for another woman." With blurry vision, Henry took the cup I was gripping tightly and gently said, "I'm sorry, he didn't deserve you." I shook my head, wiped away the tears at the corner of my eyes, and smiled. "Could you help me schedule an abortion?" He nodded, stood up, tucked in my blanket, and left with my medical chart. I stared blankly while touching my still relatively flat belly. Suddenly, Tim's call came through on my phone. It was 8:30 in the morning. Looks like he stayed at the hospital with Wendy all night before heading home. So, and 4 really takes all night, or maybe after the 4, He couldn't bear to leave her alone, given her pitiful expression. His voice was hoarse and tired. "Emily, where did you go?" At that moment, a surge of anger threatens to explode from my chest. I wanted to confront him, ask why he would ask such an obvious question, why he thought I would wait at home like nothing had happened, listening to his lies. I held back the anger, took a deep breath. "Tim, I've said it already, we're done." Silence on the other end, heavy breathing, and then finally, "Emily, don't say that. It was a mistake. There's a life at stake. I couldn't just abandon her. She was on the rooftop, unstable, threatening to jump. I didn't want to agitate her, so I didn't push her away. Please, don't make a scene. We're almost married." "Tim, you disgust me." My voice was cold and filled with disdain. "If you admitted you never got over her and wanted to leave amicably to be with her, I might even respect you for your honesty. But you didn't. You're a coward." As he tried to explain, I hung up and blocked his number. At 12:30, I strolled down the hospital corridor, ready for my abortion. But there he was at the corner, gently supporting Wendy, holding a thermos. It was the thermos he bought to make me nutritious meals when I had surgery before. Our eyes met, and for a moment, his hand on the thermos paused awkwardly. Suddenly, I found it amusing, calmly walking past them. Tim grabbed my wrist, awkwardly explaining, "She's got no one to take care of her, I was just bringing her food." His eyes caught the paper in my hand, and they lit up with a hint of surprise, which turned complex when he saw Wendy standing pale beside him. "Emily, you're pregnant?" Then he saw the words abortion and gripped my arm fiercely. "You're getting an abortion?" I nodded. His anger made him release my hand so sharply that I stumbled into the wall. The thud of my head hitting the wall was dull. My vision blurred with pain. "Emily, you..." Tim's face was full of fear as he approached, but I pushed him away. Just as I was about to fall, Henry ran over with a blanket to support me. Tim froze, squinting suspiciously. "Why is he here? Did you dump me for him?" Before he could finish, Henry punched him hard. "You dare say that? Where were you when she fainted and was hospitalized? What, calling it friendship makes cheating okay?" Henry's gaze swept disdainfully towards Wendy. "Besides, she broke up with you. Whatever she does is none of your business." Tim's face turned pale as he tried to reach out. "Emily, I know I've done things that upset and hurt you. I'm sorry, but this is our child. Don't be heartless. I'm just helping her. I never planned to get back together. Forgive me? We're about to get married." Wendy looked at him in disbelief, biting her lip. "Tim, you left her at the registry office for me and kissed me in front of her. Isn't that wanting to get back with me?" Wendy's sharp words echoed, and onlookers glanced at Tim with contempt. Tim turned stiffly to me, lips trembling, desperate to justify, but words failed him. The screen flashed my name. Henry softly said, "I'll wait for you outside." "Emily, don't go," Tim nearly cried, pleading. The dizziness finally faded as I steadied myself and walked toward Tim. He seemed incredulous, extending a hand to catch me. But then I grabbed his hair and slammed his head into the wall. "Don't mess with me again." Tim slumped on the ground, his eyes filled with a defeated look. He mumbled sadly, "Is there no way to get you back?" I didn't look at him, walked straight towards the operating room without hesitation. The illusion from our first meeting had shattered completely. Maybe this was who he really was. After the surgery, for a month, Henry came every day with nutritious meals for me. I felt a bit embarrassed. He said, "Last time I accidentally bumped into you and didn't compensate, so here's my chance." So, I didn't decline. In our chats, I found out he's the heir to the wealthy family in the capital. His car accident happened because his cousin didn't want him to attend the family succession ceremony. I thought this sounded like a scene from a novel. He chuckled, glancing out the window at someone, and teased, "Now this is right out of a novel, your ex regretting in the rain." I smirked, more like a soap opera, right? Outside, chaos erupted. Tim fainted in the rain. Onlookers chatted loudly while the nurses were unfazed. He'd fainted 3 times this month already. Henry casually asked, "Aren't you going to check on him?" I replied with no expression, "I'm not a doctor. Can't cure his self-indulgence." Henry chuckled, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "That's the belly I remember." Huh. My face turned crimson. How did he know my high school nickname? He said, "In high school, before finals, my cousin threatened me not to excel." You overheard, stood with hands on your hips, and scolded him without repeating yourself. I thought then, what a cool little tiger. He paused, giving me a playful look. "I didn't get to thank you, though. Your friends dragged you off," saying Belly came to the rescue again. My cheeks burned, almost dripping with blood. Who knew that was our first meeting? Henry sighed. "I didn't expect to see such a hurt you," unable to speak up. I glanced at the falling leaves outside. I once believed love meant enduring everything, thinking it'd stop next time. Yet, being tolerant just brought more hurt. He smiled, sat beside me. "Congratulations, for being reborn and finding yourself again." Once I recovered, I decided to go home and explain to my parents about Tim and me. Henry drove me back. As we reached my neighborhood, I unbuckled. Suddenly, I didn't know how to start with them, feeling drained and slumped back in the seat. Henry seemed to notice my hesitation. "Want to fake a marriage?" he suddenly asked. Huh? I paused. "My old man has been pestering me to bring home a wife," he shrugged. "You don't mind me?" "It wasn't your fault, why should I mind?" "I admire the courage in your timely breakaway," he cut me off, looking at me seriously. I thought of my grandma and replied softly, "Okay." Henry was about to start the car right away. I was stunned and asked, "In such a rush to leave?" Laughing, he replied, "Need to grab my household register." Emily. I turned around and saw Tim standing not far away. He had lost weight. He used to care about appearances, now with unshaved stubble, he looked desolate. "Are you with him now?" I felt a bit irritated, knowing it was time to end things. "Is it any of your business?" I calmly looked at him, as if he were a stranger. He murmured, "Please, don't be with someone else." I made a mistake. I was always thinking I hadn't forgotten about her, so I allowed myself to be with her. But when she talked about getting back together, all I could think of was you. Only then did I realize, it was just my youthful dissatisfaction. "You've always been the one I love." "I don't love you anymore." I interrupted. "When you gave up on us to be with her, you lost me forever." Actually, it should have ended the day I met Wendy. Each time I forgave you for the harm you caused, that was my mistake. Tim's face turned pale, tears flowing silently. "What are you crying for?" "Crocodile tears," I told him. "Don't bother me anymore. Seeing you reminds me of your betrayal, the times you hid in your study thinking of her. Whenever I think you applied your habits with her on me and threw me aside for her again and again, I find new reasons to resent you." Tim's expression turned to deep sorrow, his voice hoarse. "I'm sorry." He said nothing more, slowly disappearing from my sight. I sat on a bench for a long time, until the skies started pouring rain, and my face was damp. Suddenly, a red checkered apron fell before me, sheltering me from the raindrops. I looked up to see my mom holding an umbrella, looking cautiously at me. Realizing it was me, her eyes welled up. "Emily, it's really you." I saw a girl far away while shopping and thought she looked like my Emily. Mom was wondering why Emily would be here, but seeing you in the rain broke my heart. I couldn't bear anyone caught in the rain, even if it wasn't my Emily. I hugged my mom tightly, crying, "Mom." She patted my head, choking back tears. "Let's go home, Mom will make you something good." On the way, Mom held my hand, asking quietly, "Broke up with Tim?" I was surprised, thinking Mom would assume we fought. My mom sighed and said, "When Tim came over to propose, he was very polite. But I could feel he was just trying hard to impress us. He didn't really seem to care about you." I felt a twinge of emotion. I hadn't realized she noticed it too. My mom pulled me into a hug. "Silly girl, you've been through so much, and you never told me." I buried my head into her shoulder. "Mom, I want some of your scallion pancakes." Suddenly, I regretted it. With family who genuinely wanted my happiness, I had settled for less in one of the most important decisions of my life. Thankfully, I realized it in time. It wasn't too late to change things. Let the past stay in the past, with all its love and regrets. Epilogue. I married Henry. He would spend weekends exploring every corner of the city with me, instead of claiming to be busy with work and buying me a gift as a substitute. He'd spontaneously give me my favorite flowers and remembered all my likes and dislikes. You'd never find seafood on our dining table. When we walked, he always held my hand and made sure I was on the inside of the sidewalk. Even if a car splashed water, his first instinct was to pull me away. Tim never showed up again. Later, Jackson told me that Tim's company failed its most critical project, which was the final blow. The downfall was caused by Wendy selling company secrets to a rival, whose boss was Wendy's fiancé. Turns out, Wendy left Tim not because her mom disapproved but because she looked down on his lack of money and left with a rich guy. That rich guy had his fun and soon ditched her for someone else abroad. When Wendy heard Tim was doing well, she came running back. To mess with Tim, she used her so-called fiancé as a pawn. But he had his plan too, targeting Tim's company. Tim, overwhelmed by it all, ended up physically confronting Wendy. Now, one is in jail and the other is in a hospital. When I heard, it didn't stir any emotion in me. It was all in the past and had nothing to do with me. I was going to live my own life. Tim's name would become just an ordinary one in my memories.